You're standing in a quiet room. Nothing is wrong, nothing is happening. And still, there's a faint tightness in your chest, not fear exactly, not sadness, just a subtle readiness. As if something might go wrong at any moment. You don't name it. You don't react to it. You simply stay alert. Maybe you're sitting on a couch that's supposed to feel soft, but your body doesn't sink into it. Your shoulders hover a little higher than they need to. Your breath never fully reaches the bottom of your lungs. Comfort is present, but you don't quite enter it. You've learned how to function this way so smoothly that it barely registers anymore. You move through days efficiently. You listen, you respond, you handle things. You're capable, you're composed. And yet, when comfort arrives, real comfort, the kind that asks nothing of you, something inside stays on guard. Not rejecting it, just not leaning into it. There was a time when you noticed comfort more clearly. When rest felt like rest. When being held emotionally or physically didn't come with a calculation. But that time feels distant now, almost theoretical. Like a place you once visited, but wouldn't know how to return to without directions. So instead, you adapted. You learned to be okay without softness. You learned to stay upright even when sitting. You learned how to be fine. This didn't happen because you were weak. It happened because you were paying attention. At some point, maybe slowly, maybe all at once, you realized that comfort wasn't guaranteed. That it could disappear. That it could be interrupted. That it could come with conditions. So your system adjusted. You stopped waiting for reassurance and started providing it to yourself, quietly. You stopped expecting someone else to notice when you were tired. You stopped assuming rest would be protected. Not consciously, not as a decision, more like a subtle shift in posture toward life. You became someone who could keep going. There's a certain dignity in that, a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. But there's also a cost. When you stop expecting comfort, you don't miss it loudly. You miss it silently, in small ways that are easy to overlook. You might notice it when someone asks, "Are you okay?" and you answer automatically before checking. Or when things finally slow down and instead of relief, you feel restless. Or when kindness shows up unexpectedly and you feel slightly embarrassed by how much it touches you. As if part of you is thinking, "Oh, I didn't know I was allowed to have this." That thought doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from patterns you learned early, not through explanation, but through repetition. Moments when your needs were too much, or inconvenient, or simply unseen. Times when being low maintenance felt safer than being honest. When asking for comfort felt riskier than enduring discomfort. So you became observant. You learned the emotional weather of rooms. You adjusted yourself accordingly. And eventually, you stopped waiting for comfort because waiting implied disappointment. This isn't a flaw. It's a form of intelligence. Your system did exactly what it needed to do to keep you steady. But here's something gentle to notice. A survival pattern doesn't disappear just because the environment changes. Even when you're no longer in the situations that shaped you, the posture can remain. The readiness, the self-containment. So now, even in moments where nothing is being demanded of you, your body stays prepared. Prepared to hold itself. Prepared to not need too much. Prepared to continue. There's often a quiet pride in this. You don't rely on comfort. You don't fall apart without it. But there's also a quiet distance from your own softness. Comfort requires a kind of trust, not just in others, but in the moment itself. And trust is something you learn to ration. You learn that comfort could be temporary, conditional, or withdrawn. So you stopped building your inner life around it. You built it around resilience instead, around endurance, around self-sufficiency. Those qualities carried you far. They still do, but they don't automatically switch off when comfort becomes available. So when someone offers care without strings, you might minimize it. When rest appears, you might fill it. When peace settles in, you might scan for the catch. Not because you're ungrateful, but because ease feels unfamiliar. There's a moment, often very brief, when comfort arrives and your system hesitates, asking, "How long will this last?" That question alone can prevent you from fully arriving in the experience. You're present, but not settled. You're receiving, but not resting. This is the part most people never talk about. Not the absence of comfort, but the difficulty of letting it in. Because letting comfort in means allowing your guard to soften. And your guard has been useful. It kept you functional. It kept you composed. It kept you safe in environments where softness wasn't always met with care. So of course it doesn't drop easily. There's no need to judge this. Judgment only adds another layer of tension. Instead, just notice. Notice how your body responds when things are quiet. Notice what happens when you're not needed. Notice how quickly you move to fill space that could have been rest. These aren't problems to solve. They're signals to understand. Understanding doesn't require force. It doesn't require change. It begins with recognition. You might start to see that your relationship with comfort isn't about preference. It's about permission. Somewhere along the way, you learned that comfort was optional for you. Secondary, something to be earned or postponed. And you adapted beautifully. But adaptation isn't the same as choice. Choice returns when awareness does. And awareness doesn't demand that you suddenly become soft or relaxed or open. It simply invites curiosity. What happens if, for just a few seconds, you don't brace? What happens if you let your shoulders drop without explaining why? What happens if you allow a moment to be enough? Nothing dramatic needs to occur. No transformation. No release. No conclusion. Just a slight shift in attention. A willingness to notice that comfort doesn't have to be permanent to be real. That receiving doesn't obligate you to anything. That rest doesn't mean you've stopped being capable. Sometimes comfort isn't a destination. It's a sensation that passes through when allowed. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to hold on to it. You only have to stop pushing it away before it even arrives. And even that happens gradually. There may be days when comfort still feels distant. Days when staying alert feels easier. That's okay. Patterns that kept you safe don't dissolve on command. They soften through understanding. Through moments like this, quiet, reflective, non-demanding. Moments where you realize that your way of being makes sense. That your guardedness isn't a failure. That your endurance was never an accident. And maybe over time, you notice something else too. That comfort isn't something you have to expect in order to experience. Sometimes it arrives when you're simply present enough to recognize it. A deeper breath you didn't force. A moment of stillness that doesn't feel empty. A sense of being held by nothing more than the present moment. You don't need to cling to these moments. They're not a standard to maintain. They're just reminders. Reminders that your system knows how to soften, even if it hasn't always felt safe to. And knowing that gives you something quietly powerful. Not a command to change. Not a requirement to open. Just the option. Awareness gives you choice, not obligation. You can keep moving the way you always have. And you can also begin to notice when comfort is already near, waiting patiently, not demanding anything from you. If you stay with reflections like this, whether here or elsewhere, let them be companions, not authorities. Mirrors, not instructions. You're not here to be fixed. You're here to understand yourself a little more clearly. And that clarity alone can be surprisingly gentle. So take a breath. You don't have to justify. Let the moment be as it is. And remember, nothing about your way of surviving disqualifies you from softness. You're allowed to notice comfort now, even if you don't fully trust it yet. And that by itself is already enough.